I'm Kyle Kuhnhausen, standing here in the CCW Momo booth at SEMA 2018. This is Insanity, the 240Z that I built. It's been a 5-year project around other things in my life, but I didn't want to rush what I believe would be perfection. I've done everything on this car besides spray the paint and stitch the interior. It is the epitome of everything I'm capable of doing. This is my resume, my first solo build, and I'm just so excited to introduce you to what I can do. It's been awesome incorporating Vibrant Performance products into the build. I've always used them at my shop for everything. So we'll see a few of those, and we'll see some of these kind of more ingenious handcrafted ideas versus bolt-on parts that I've tried to incorporate. So this is one of the 3 sections of the car that I would say is one of my babies. Right off the bat, you can see that this is an LS Powerplant. It's an LS1. We're putting 347 wheel horsepower to the rear, 315 millimeter wide tires, 383 foot-pounds of torque. It is not just another LS swap in my opinion. I've done everything I can do to build something that transcends the stigma of just throwing an LS in a Z. I tried to make it the way that if Datsun had put a V8 in this car, they would have done it. From the carbon handmade, wiring covers with all the aircraft rivets. Everything I do up here is all done by hand. I don't have CNC capabilities currently. So all this stuff just kind of comes from my mind onto the metal canvas, and it creates something that has some soul to it. It's not just another bolt-on, part. I've got all the handmade pie cut pieces, the intake, the radiator hose, the brake ducting, and I wanted to use kind of a resume effect. I used a Vibrant HD clamp. I welded the ferrule to the throttle body to save space, and I did aluminum on that. I did stainless steel on these brake ducts, and I did titanium on the upper radiator hose to just show the full range of my capabilities with a TIG welder. Titanium is obviously the most exotic of the materials. I would have loved to use that for all of it, and I eventually will. But for now, I just wanted to showcase the art of fabrication versus the art of just going completely insane parts-wise. I've got a full Radium Engineering fuel system on this thing that comes to a custom handcrafted regulator, heat shield, anything I could do to kind of mitigate having issues at the track, because this is a drive to the track car. It was built to do 2-hour-long drives to the track, race all day, have fun, drive home, no problem. So everything has to be so robust and overbuilt. It's just incredible. I've got a handmade radiator shroud with a titanium closeout. Any air that hits the front of this car, I need to be doing something, whether that's going around the car or cooling the radiator or the brake ducts. Over here, normally you would have a battery sitting here since it's a Datsun. They come with these very cool factory flaps. I wanted to add some function to those so that we're not just throwing a motor in the Datsun, but we're incorporating the systems in the chassis. So I made a closeout panel here, and then I made this bolt-in aluminum overflow tank for the radiator, and then I used a Vibrant cap, which I modified as the vent/cap. And then that just closes up, and it's functional again, and I really like that piece. As you can see down here, we have scat tubing coming actually up through the engine bay. It made more sense to do it that way because now we only have a small scat tubing portion from the apron out to the brake ducts, because when you're spinning these big meaty tires, so many times, eventually that scat tubing will wear out. So now we only have to replace a section this big versus a section this big. Titanium is a newer thing in my arsenal of things that I do. With Vibrant's introduction of readily available titanium products for fabricators, it's made it a lot easier for me to utilize them in my builds. So I wanted to throw some here on this completely frivolous radiator tube, but it really adds to the fabricated, handmade theme of the car. Probably my favorite portion of this car is the interior, because it's so much different than anything I've seen. I didn't really draw any inspiration from other vehicles in that aspect, whereas other portions of the car I have. This is more aircraft inspired, and it turned out to be kind of an organic unique area, and it creates an experience for this car. So let's take a look. When you come into the car, the first thing you see is gratuitous flared holes, because that's just my style. But they're all serving a purpose. We're tying into the chassis with the roll cage for strength on the body. We don't have a door bar, as you see, because this is not an SCCA wheel-to-wheel race car. This is a experience. It's a drive to the track day car. We've strengthened this chassis so much by incorporating all these flared holes. I mean, it comes all the way up and all the way down the sides. And then you move to the heel plate, which is really a special piece. It's probably one of my top 5 favorite hand fabricated pieces on this car, which is saying a lot because there's about 1,000 hand fabricated pieces on this car. This piece is rare, being that it's 0.50 thousandths thickness, 50-52 aluminum, because normally people go with a much thicker, heavier aluminum so that you don't have the oil can effect. To mitigate that and use a thinner material, I have gone with so many flared holes, and then I've even inset where the driver's heels go to optimize the ergonomics on the pedals. And then I've laid down a nice carbon fiber skid piece so that we can just replace that as it wears out, because your heels are going to be busy in this car. It's quite a handful. But even under that, there are flared holes. And of course, the pedal protectors. You see that moves right up to the clutch pedal. Since we have utilized the factory clutch pedal in this Datsun, I've actually cut a piece of steel exactly like the factory clutch pedal, doubled it, TIG welded that all seam together, and then added an additional gusset. We moved to this really cool Momo Quick-Release attached to a Woodward steering column with this great, really cool kind of a vintage inspired steering wheel. I like this because it's similar with the whole pattern to what these came with, but it's still a suede racing wheel. Because this is a modern car. Let's be honest. It's got an old school body. It's got some of that charm and elegance from 1972, but this is a modern car. Every bolt, every nut, everything on this car pretty much was not built by Datsun. So you move right into here. You come down and you see, what's this? It's got electronic power steering on this car. I actually turned on my lathe quite a few parts and did a lot of TIG welding, but I've mated a Woodward NASCAR style column to an EPOS power steering box, and we have a potentiometer on the dash, so I can actually tell you, we can turn down the trim if we're at the track and we want more feel, but if we're in the parking lot, we can crank it up to 10, spin the wheel with almost one finger. It's very nice for the track versus being able to go get groceries in this car factor. And then you come into my dash. My dash is very special to me. I built this cluster area out of 13 pieces of TIG welded aluminum, which I formed, smoothed, and then I made it bolt to the dash with 4 bolts. So undo 4 bolts and you get to an electronic shelf in behind there. Very easy to access. That's the electronics we don't really need to play with, but if there ever was an issue, it's very serviceable. To a CNC cut carbon fiber switch panel with aviation inspired instruments. Versus, instead of a PDM style, which you'd see in a lot of high-end cars, I kept it more old school because I like the switch look. It looks more aircraft to me and correct to what I'm doing in this interior. And then of course you see everything is made out of aluminum in this interior basically that I've added. The center console, the navigation / rear view mirror in the dash. We'll get more into that later. The CNC, I had this bezel CNC made for the shifter based off my design with a top fill for the oil in the transmission. So instead of having a pump from under the car, we can actually just unscrew that cap, put in 4 quarts, put it back on, and you're good to go. And then of course you see we have a smile lever for kicks, because every car should come equipped with those in my opinion. J-turns on the street, definitely a necessity. Not really, we use that at the track. But I've also got integrated fire suppression and a Willwood proportioning valve adjustment knob on the dash, which is kind of special because that normally goes to a pedal box that's proprietary for adjusting the bias of the brakes. I've adapted that to a external proportioning valve by way of machining and some ingenuity, and I'm actually adjusting just a standard proportioning valve with that knob, which I thought was kind of cool. Obviously you see some carbon fiber accents here and there, and then I've kept the factory air vents in the front. I've actually fabricated in all that air dam, air management paneling vents that go to up through the frame of this car into the cabin. So at speed, you're getting forced air on your feet. It's kind of nice. And then of course the factory hood pop is integrated also into the cage, because I did not want to use hood latches, external hood latches, since the hood opens from the back, European style, because it's really not necessary, and it would detract from the BRE themed stripes that I kind of molded in my image of what Peter Brock was trying to do into my hood vents. So the passenger side is my baby. Obviously, you see the hexagonally stitched suede door panels with the handmade carbon fiber insert to kind of break up the finished interior versus the raw painted two-tone. I hand aircraft riveted all these. These are all TIG welded. I built them, and then I drilled holes and TIG welded sleeves into those holes to add kind of an artistic effect. You can see, through it, but it's not just holes drilled. I've actually TIG welded sleeves into every one of these. Done carbon fiber inlays, just little stuff like that. That doesn't excite me as much as maybe this fabrication side of things. You go into here, you've got another heel plate. It's a little more interesting though. You see it's got this big footrest for the passenger, and it serves two functions actually. It's a good brace for the passenger's feet, because this car is capable of scaring a passenger, let me tell you. But you come down here, it's got a single quick latch. And if I push that button, I come back to some rubber bumpers, and you've got more floor space for the drive home. But we're also protecting this circuit breaker panel that I've got. This car has a proprietary wiring harness that we made at my shop. Me and my father helped me a little bit with the wiring on that. I do the routing of things, and he's a guru at, what should we connect and things. So I'm really grateful to have his wisdom every now and then to depend on. But this whole panel is also on these quick latches. In the form and function, combined aspect of things, I can push 4 quick latches. I've made an extra long harness, pull that whole thing over onto my lap, sitting in these awesome Momo seats, and all the power distribution is done up top. So anything that could possibly go wrong with the wiring of this car, you can actually pull out and set on your lap, versus getting up in here, up under the dash like everybody's done at the track. That's not a good day. We try to not do that. And since it's a customer's vehicle, anytime I can make it easier for them to help me diagnose on the fly if something does go awry is good for me, because I don't like those phone calls. And then here's the you got to get the sound. This is how you know it's quality fabrication. Solid. 1 quick latch. This is also one of my cool features I've done. Since it's a street car race car, this is obviously a bespoke aluminum dash I've built, and I've even made bulkheads into the cage, tying this whole area in that sit flush with this dash. But you see it's got a button there, and then it's pretty nicely trimmed around. There's not a big gap, like a hinge would be. It's because I used that button to pull this out. It's using Ford style headliner magnets that newer Fords use to actually hold the headliners up. One of the byproducts of me being an auto body tech is I run into some of these cool things that factories are doing, and I try to incorporate them in my custom builds. But you can see that it holds gloves. It's sized for racing gloves, because this is a race car, street car, so we keep our registration and race gloves in. And in the back, there's actually flared holes into this glove box area I've made, just to kind of put the cherry on top of the flared hole theme. And then when I'm done, back in, presto, we're flushed. So that is pretty much the interior, and now I think we'll move back to my third aspect of the car that I really, really like. So if you come around here, the click of a button, you open up to this honeycomb pattern fuel cell cover. It's my baby. I spent a lot of time hand rolling this panel, and it turned out just amazing. I'm really, really excited with it. And then it kind of picture frames this Radium FCST surge tank system. And then I use these vibrant lines to plumb the fuel out of the cabin with the nice red tracer in there. It's really a nice touch, because I try to use little pieces of red to draw interest but not overpower in my builds. You can see I've got a red fire suppression redundant nozzle back, pull back here. And that's inside because this is a street car. It has a license plate. We will drive it to the track. I don't want to park in some parking lot, have a young kid see this cool red lever and come pull it, because that's a nightmare. And then all this is done with ARP 12-point stainless fasteners, which just they add that unique like luxurious touch to any kind of a fabricated panel. So I was super excited to be able to use all those. And then I've got custom made caps I've built, because obviously we have camber adjustable plates up on the strut towers, which leaves a big hole into the interior. And we don't like to get dust and rocks and smoke up in there. So I just made some nice, quickly removable caps so we can still adjust all this on the fly real easy. 2 Phillips screws, and then you're done. And then I've carpeted the back area here because it's a street car. Eventually we may want to run in maybe like the Optima Challenge series. And this is just adds to the street car credibility of the vehicle. There's endless detail. I've got a adjustable 3-piece wicker bill style spoiler back here. These are fixed, but these can move. I've actually done bracing inside the lid, so I don't have to run struts. Here's where I've named the car. It's Insanity. The fabrication, the build, my dedication to making this thing is just insane. And so we've just done a little play on words, Insanity. These are a CNC'd custom piece that I had my buddy Matt machine out for me based off my design to replace the cheesy plastic ones that come from the factory. It cleans it up, gives me a nice place to brand the car without being overbearing of the car. And then you can come over here and see I've got charge ports out here. It's because I've got a sub-mounted Braille battery over here. It weighs 11 pounds, it's just crazy. But that's how you access it. So it's still a usable car. We can, hook up the charger to this car if we need, if something goes awry. It's not like, it's remote mounted, but it's not inaccessible, still usable. And then something most people miss is I've got a rear view camera Frenched in here to the license plate light holder. And that is actually a lifetime rear view mirror in the dash. So you've got all this cage work in the car. It makes it a little hard to see out the rear window, but we're actually watching from here. So we have a nice, clean, unobstructed view of the cars that are behind us, because I'm sure there will be many cars behind us. And then obviously this looks a little cleaner than the factory does. This is really a nice detail here I like. Once you shave the bumper, Datsun has a little recess that comes to about here. I like the recess. Most people would just shave that because it's much easier. I wanted to use it to accentuate the car. So I did the metal work to actually fill this in and make it symmetrical with this license plate. So it's one little detail that most people would miss, but it really is a cool detail because this adds quite a bit of difficulty in doing the body work and keeping the line straight. This is actually a functional tow hook. I've got a 120 wall TIG welded fuel cell cage that ties in 8 places to the rear uniframe rails. And then this is TIG welded right to that with lots of bracing. So we can actually hold the full weight of this car without distorting the panels and such if we ever were to go off track. Obviously you see the aerodynamics. This diffuser is about 80% done as far as I need to go test this car. I need to put some oil on the diffuser, see how the air is playing with it at the track, which we're gonna do after SEMA. And then if you just follow the car up here, you see, I've got these nice air vents. We're letting dirty air that could get trapped from the tire out of the quarter panels. And then up in here, if you could look, you would see a fire suppression bottle, a custom aluminum shroud that protects not only the fire suppression nozzle, but it also houses a rear differential cooler, because this car has a differential cooling system that's semi-proprietary. I spent quite a bit of time developing how to make it more efficient. So we're taking the dirty air off this tire. We are using that to suck through the cooler, which is all thermostatically controlled, no driver interface. We can override it, but we don't need to. At 180 degrees Fahrenheit, it will kick on its own. And it just circulates differential oil through this cooler and back to the differential, where I've TIG welded a bung right on the ring gear. So we're hitting the ring gear, we're splash lubricating this Q45 differential, and it's just keeping that oil cool and dispensed, and we can actually add some volume to that. So we've got the differential oil covered, the transmission oil covered, and the engine oil covered. Very simply, easy maintenance. All we gotta do is keep changing out tires, because this thing will eat them, let me tell you. We've got functional rear brake ducts. This is a unique piece in that lots of people spend time developing front brake ducts, which I've done, but I've also got force-fed air rear brake ducts right to the center of the rotor. So the centrifugal force of the wheel moving and this rotor spinning is actually pulling air through. So we're forcing air in and then we're pulling it through. So it's just a really efficient, nice system. Obviously this car has suspension to match all these cool factors that we've added. It's got an Arizona Z-Car billet track pack, very incredible adjustability, Heim joints everywhere. I've done a few little tricks and modifications of my own here and there to fit 315 wide tires. These are 11-inch CCW LM20 with BF Goodrich rival tires that are meaty. And then if you move forward, you'll see I've got this nice side splitter. It's very stout. That's where we grab the air to feed the rear brake ducts, but it's also where we diffuse this exhaust system. These side splitters are cool to me. They actually hold a function, and I've used rubber-coated aluminum rivets to attach them to the body, which hold enough to keep them on there at speed and keep using that downforce. But if we do go off track, in theory, I think it will rip these rivets before it destroys the panels. So we have big aero, but it's functional big aero. And then the side exit exhaust out of the fender is obviously necessary on every car, in my opinion. But this one is unique in that it is extremely quiet. Everybody is just baffled how I made it so quiet. I don't want to detract bad attention for this car from, you know, the street driving aspect, or like if we want to go to Laguna Seca with it, or a track where it's has a strict decibel limit. So the right bank feeds the left side's exhaust and vice versa. They cross over in front of the sump on the oil pan. They come through the frame actually. I've made super reinforced lower uniframe rails with holes in them where the exhaust actually passes through. And we house a Corvette MagnaFlow muffler behind this tire. There's 167 weld seams on this exhaust that are all back purge TIG welded. And I use 2.5-inch Vibrant straight tubing, which I then pie cut. And of course, the front brakes are ducted similar to the rear brakes. So this front end is very controversial, but I love it. Everybody thinks it has braces with all these struts, but these struts are necessary because I use HDPE plastic versus carbon fiber or aluminum on my aero because this is a street-driven car. We have to navigate speed bumps, curbs, things like that, but still keep all that downforce under control. As you can see, could you do this on a splitter without all these rods? I don't think you could unless it was a engineered carbon fiber piece, because we are trying to press these front tires into the pavement. We want to force them in so that we can take turns at a faster rate of speed. In the theme of flared holes and efficiency, this bumper I wanted to leave as my support for the splitter, but this area here is where air could be going to the radiator, so why not? I actually turned my own Dimple die flares on my lathe to make them fit in this bumper space. This is a factory steel bumper, which I've shaved, obviously, tucked, and then made a tool to flare these holes in it so that we are getting a maximum amount of air. The only reason it doesn't even spread all the way across here is because we have bracketry and such that's holding the bumper on. But below that, you see we've got these brake ducts, we've got a radar detector, and then radar refractors. This is all aluminum. It's hard to see kind of the depth of things, but there's different angles. It's not just a square, flat piece. It flows out across. We're trying to direct air across the tires, and at some point I may do a V2 of this front end. Once my carbon fiber abilities are more up on par, I have a friend at Sean Bassett, who actually has a pretty notable Z using a few Vibrant Performance products that knows a thing or two about carbon. I've got a tow hook here, which is actually two pieces. You can unscrew this front area if you want, but that ties back into the frame with 4 bolts, so it's very strong. And then I use a 1/4-inch bolt here. If we were to catch on something, I hope that maybe it would break this aluminum or that bolt before it would rip it off the chassis. It's a factory grill, obviously modified to kind of house and hide the refractors. And then this all just is scooping air. We're sending air to the front brakes, we're sending air to the radiator, and we're sending air out around the tire, all the while creating more downforce for the car at speed. And then you move up the hood, you see these awesome Track Spec Motorsports hood vents. We're just letting some of that pressure out from this air that we're taking into the radiator, and we're letting some of the dirty air out of the fender wells. I'm Kyle Kuhnhausen. You can find me at Instagram at KCKuhnhausen or my website, www.kuhnhausenmetalconcepts.com. I'm the builder of Insanity, and I would like to thank you for your time letting me explain my car. I'm obviously very passionate about it. It's my baby. I call it mine, but it's actually my customers. I have a very gracious customer that's allowed me to create this resume. And I'd also like to thank a few people and a few companies that have come together to make this a reality. I mean, I am one man, I do most of the work, but in reality, I have a whole support crew. First off, my parents, Kim and Chris, I actually built this in their shop. My home garage is too small. They have a nice 2-car garage that's detached from the house so I can make noise at 2 in the morning if I need to. They've been very gracious and let me keep that there for 5 years. The owner, Dennis, and his family, obviously, for letting me play with their car, you know. Without them, I can't create this vision. I wouldn't even have this vision. I came from a world of Camaros. This has opened my eyes to the Datsun community, and I've fallen in love. Radium engineering, Vibrant Performance, obviously, because I've been using Vibrant in my shop for everything. There's actually an S14 in South Hall. I've done crazy Vibrant pie cuts everywhere, clamps. Vibrant has been good to me, and it's so awesome to partner with such a great company that is really innovating in the industry and manufacturing. BF Goodrich tires, CCW wheels, obviously, we were in their booth at SEMA 2018, along with Momo Motorsports, who's also been very gracious in helping me really bring this interior to perfection, mixing my handmade components with their very nice bolting components. I'd like to thank ARP Bolts for jumping on board at the last hour to help me just bring this build to the next level, to compete with all these huge guys, the Roadster Shop, the Ring Brothers. Think about trying to be on their stage is just incredible. And I hope that I've done justice trying to imitate what they do. I'd like to thank Karam Concepts, my friend Knox Karam. He's done all this lovely powder coat work you can see down here and on the turtle shell fuel cover and the heel plates, the dash. He's knocked it out of the park. These wheels actually were powder coated by Knox. I'd like to thank Exalta Refinishes for supporting me with this Ford Stealth Gray paint. This is by far my favorite color that this car could have ever been painted, and they were really gracious to support us not only on this car but in business at my father's business, Fix Auto Collision in Springfield, where I was able to do this body work after hours because I'm an auto body tech by day at the moment, and so I just do flat rate body work all day, and then I come home or I clock out and I start grinding on all this high-end fabrication work and body work and such. And I'd also like to thank just anybody that's inspired me to keep pushing forward. There's so many great builds out there that push me to just keep reaching, and that's how you end up with a car like this, is just somebody who's inspired to reach for just levels that they didn't think they could achieve. So that is Insanity.